Hi guys, this is William and welcome to the Visionaire Studio training, Basic for Beginners, where we will look at how to create a working game from scratch. Now, when you start up Visionaire, you have two options here. You have create a new game or create a new game with minimal configuration. Now, what we will be covering is the create new game and the steps needed to get to a working executable game. So what you will find in the link of the video below, you should have a zip file available to download, and in the zip file we have a PDF that contains all the instruction that we will cover in this lesson. Also, we will have graphics that you can utilize. The only folder that will not be present is the font folder. This you can download yourself. You can get a font and just use that in your game. But background images, character and icons, that will be available in the zipped file. We also have two Visionaire files that you can open. This is a completed project. This is the project you open, and this is the same as creating a brand new scene. But I did add it there for you. Right, so we are now here. I am going to click load existing game, and I'm going to open me first this file right here. This is the blank file, and this is the one that we will work in. Now, before we jump into Visionaire and the interface and so on, let's just quickly cover a few basics. This is not going to be a video where I do a deep dive on all the different options. That's not the point of this. The point of this video is to give you the ability to work with a project from scratch so that you know all the different moving parts necessary to get a game up and running. Everything that you need to do in a project to get this save and run button to work successfully. Right? Nothing is pre-built for you. Nothing is pre-set up. You need to do all of it. And this is also why it's important that you take a look at this PDF file, because all the steps that I'm going to cover, there's quite a bit of steps, and it's important that you at least have a reference for that. So the idea is if you follow this document, you should be good to go. Let's just quickly briefly talk about all the steps necessary. So in total, there are 9 steps that you need to do to get a game up and running. The first is to set up your scene. Here in the first step, we define the background image. We set where a character can walk and where a character cannot walk. We define the items that a character can interact with. We set the way system and the path finding, right? And also the character size. The next step is the objects that a player can interact with. So here we say, right, here's an item the character can pick up. Here is an item that a character can look at. Different interactions that we can do. We set up hotspots. We add names to our objects. And we set where a character needs to be or where a character walks to when the user clicks on a hotspot. The third item is the fonts. So here we add the font to be used whenever text is displayed on the screen. And we also change the size of the font or the letter spacing, etc. Then we define the player character. We create our character, we add the images that represent that character, and we define the animation centers. We also set properties like where does that character stand when the scene loads? Items like that. Then next we also set our cursors. So which cursors will I use? What will my walk cursor look like? What will my use cursor look like? What will my talk cursor look like? We set an active and an inactive version, and we also set the animation centers for each. Then step 6, interfaces. So we've created our cursors. Now we need to create an interface that acts as a communicator or pulls everything together That is our interface that uses the cursors that we created. So here we create individual commands. And when I say command, I mean things like look at, use, walk to, and so on. And to do that, we also have some properties that we need to set to have it all work the way we want it to. Then we have the game properties. And this is like the overall game properties that we need to set. What is the first scene that loads? Which character is the active character? What is the resolution of our game? These are the sort of things we do in that step. And then we can also, step 8 is also adding into action. So I've created my object earlier, but now I want something to happen. What happens, what needs to happen when a character looks at an object, right? That's what we are talking about. And the very last step is the save and run your game. So we're going to save our game and we're going to run it to see it in action. So these are the 9 steps. It might sound like a lot, but once you get familiar with the process, it becomes second nature. So like we said, the first step is to set up our scene. And here we will add our background image and create walkable areas and so on. Now, to add an image or to add a scene, we need to go to the scene button right here. So I'm going to click there. And here we have my scene content. So here I'm going to add a new scene by clicking on the green plus icon. Now when I do this, it will give me an option. Do I want to create a scene or a menu? We want to create the actual background where a character walks and interacts and so on. So we're going to choose a scene. Then I am going to rename this to something more appropriate. So I will call this hallway. Now we need to assign the actual image. And to do that, I am going to ensure my scene is selected. I click on properties, and here I have my background image. Now, if I click on this little browse button, I can then go and choose the image that I want to work with. So in the graphics folder, there is a folder called background images, and you just select the hallway and click open. And now when I've done this, it will add it as its own background here. So here, this allows us to see what the player will see and add interaction areas and walkable zones and so on. So I'm happy with this. I've created my background and I'm going to close this window. So the next step is to define where can our character walk. Now obviously it's going to be on this carpeted area, but the Visionaire system doesn't know this. So we need to tell it expressly where the character is allowed to walk. We do this in the way system area. I am going to click on way system and click on the plus button. Now this will add 2 things for me. It will add a way border, which defines the walkable area, and it will add waypoints, a waypoint option, which defines how my character navigates the walkable area. So my character is here. What is the path he takes to move to here? That's the difference between the two. So first up, we are going to set our way borders. So I'm going to click on way borders, and then what you'll see is my mouse has turned into a plus icon, right? A green plus, which means that I can click and set a boundary like you can see here. Now this is going to be the area that my character can walk in. When I want to close the border, I move back over my first place down point, and then I will get a little check mark. So I can see that this is the case, so I click once. Now this, I have now set the walkable area for my character. Next up, we need to set the waypoints. So how does my character actually navigate this space? Now to do that, click on waypoints. And then the same thing applies. You can see I've got a little plus icon that appeared. Now, the same process, I click and drag a line. But keep in mind, don't put navigation waypoints outside of your border area, your walkable zone, right? So I'm going to assume that the character stands at the back, and the character will possibly walk forward. He might walk to the doors and perhaps to the corners here. So I am going to set down those navigation paths. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to click again. And you can see there's a single line that's been created. Now I want to have a line here as well, because the character needs to navigate to the doors. But the navigation path needs to be connected, right? So what I would instead do is, I don't want the character to walk down and then walk to the door from here. That doesn't make sense. So I'm going to undo this point, and I'm going to put a point right there. And then I'm going to put a point right there. So then I am going to connect a new line between this point and there. Now to do that, I'm going to right click to deselect the point I had. I'm going to click this point again and left click, and there I have a new line. So now the character will walk like that and like that, right? I'm going to do that again and do that, right? So now our character can walk pretty much where we want him to. And just a quick side note, if I want to remove a point, so there I have my point selected, and I'm going to place a new point, and I want to remove that point, I simply select an adjacent point and right click on that point I want to delete. And that's your scene. Your scene has now been set up. So objects. Let's look at objects. Now objects are items that your character can interact with. And all objects are managed from this tab right here called Objects. And we will now create an object that our character will interact with. Now to do this, click on the green plus icon, and this will add a new object to your scene. And I'm going to call this door. And this will represent the door right here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define the borders, right? The object area or the hotspot. And you do this with this button right here. So I'm going to ensure that my object is selected. I'm going to click on the edit object area, and I can see that my mouse has turned into a plus cursor again. So just ensure that you are not on the way system when you go back to objects, right? Otherwise, when you click, it's going to want to add to the line. So ensure that you are not on the way system so that you don't see any lines right here, and then go to objects. So now ensure that your door is selected, select the object area, and then start to put down lines. And this will then be the hotspot area for your door. Now there's a few more properties that we need to set for this object. And the properties we set in this area right here. So I'm going to click on properties, and the first thing I need to set is the object name. So I will call this door. The next item we need to define is the position. When we click on the hotspot, where does our character walk to interact with us? That's the position. So I want the character to walk up to, let's say, there, or let's say there, to interact with the door. But I need to expressly tell Visionaire that that is the spot. And that's the point of the position parameters. So to do that, click on the Set Object Position. And when I do this, I will get a view of the full screen, and I can now click to set that position. And you'll see you get a little crosshair cursor placed right there in front of the door. Once I'm happy, I'm going to click OK. And you can see that the waypoint has been set by these X and Y coordinates that's been filled in. Previously, both were set to 0. So this means when I interact with this door, the character will walk to that point. right? The next step is to set the fonts. Here we will click on A. This is the font area. Now to create a font, we need to click on the plus icon right here. I will do that, and I will call this default font. And then on this default font, there's some different settings that I need to set. So this is going to be a true type font. So I'm going to tick that. I am then going to load in a new font in this field right here by clicking there. And I will use Roboto Condensed. Now once I've added this, I will get a preview of my text. But it looks quite squished, right? And that's because of the formatting. So we need to change that. Let's increase the letter spacing, and let's increase the size like I'm doing right here. That's then the font that we've set. Right, now step 4, characters. We are now going to create our main character, or our character that our player will use as the avatar. Now to do this, click on the character icon right there. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new character. Do this by clicking on the plus icon right there. And I will call this main character. And we now need to define the images that will represent our character. And we do this under outfits. If I click on the plus icon, I can see I have walk animations and standing animations. Now both of these need to be set. At this point we won't deal with animations, we're only going to put static images in there. So the walking animations are animations that play when our character walks, and standing animations are what plays when a character is idle. Now each of these are divided into 4 directions, as you can see there. Now you can have more directions, but for this exercise we'll only have 4. You have front, back, left and right, which means that when a character is walking to the front of the screen, this animation will play. When a character is walking backwards, this will play. Left and right. The same when a character is idle. So we will now add an image to each of these items. Now to add an image, we will choose our walking animation direction and we will click on the plus icon, add frame. When I do this, I will get this dialog pop up. Now I want to load in the image that will be used for the front. So I will click on the browse button and I will go to the folder called character and I will choose front.png. Now this is then the image that will be displayed when my character is standing still, facing forward or walking forward. So I will click OK. And then the next step we need to do is we need to set the animation center. And this is usually at the character's feet. And you do this by choosing this button right here and clicking and placing it. Now, if you by accident find that you're not seeing the images you're expecting to see, keep in mind that there is this keyframing option as well. We are dealing with one image, but it could be that you've accidentally added 2 images here. And then what you'll see is it adds both keyframes there. So if you're confused on why your front is not showing the correct one and you're loading in new images, or your character is flicking between different incorrect images, this is probably the reason. So just ensure that you have your correct item shown and only one keyframe. Now do exactly the same for the standing animation front. Now we will repeat this for each part. So I will choose the back image, and for my standing animation as well, my left, animation center, and my right. So the images and the animation centers are now set. We now need to set some properties for our character. And this is done in the Property tab right there. So I'm going to click there in Properties. And here we have a property called Character Stands At. And this will define where our character stands when the scene loads. Now, this is something that we need to define for the game to play properly. And the form that this takes the form of an actual object in our scene. Remember when we did the door object earlier? This is exactly the same, except we will create an object called Player Start Position. So, to do that, we go back to the scene. And here I will click on the plus icon and create a player start position. And remember with the door, we set the position right there, which defined that the character will walk to that point when we interact with the door. The player position uses the same parameter. So we then here, by clicking there, define that my character will stand here when we load the scene. And if done correctly, you will see that the X and Y parameters have been filled in. So, we have now created our player start position. We know it's a requirement on our character, but we haven't yet connected this up. Visionaire does not yet know that that is the position we need to use. So we go back to Properties, and Character Stands At, we are going to click there. I'm going to click on Hallway to choose this scene. And then I'm going to choose Player Start Position. And when I click OK, Visionaire now knows to use that as the starting position when my scene loads. We also need to set the font for our character, because the character needs to know what font to use. And we also do this under Properties. Here in this font drop down, I just choose my default font. And remember, we created the fonts right here, so this is the one I'm choosing under Properties right there. And the next item is we need to now define the size of our character when our character moves from the back of this room to the front. Now obviously, when a character is at the back, a character will be smaller. When he is at the front, he will be bigger, and that creates the impression that he's moving across the room in distance. And to do that, we need to click on the way system and waypoints. And the way that this works is Visionaire defines the size based on these points. So I'm going to just choose front here, and when I move my mouse over the screen, you can see my character size, right? And this is a way for you to gauge what is the size at specific points. This is how Visionaire informs you of what the end result will be. Now, take a look here. My kitty is about this high. If you look, his head just touches that upper part of the wooden beam. Now, if I wanted my kitty to be larger here but smaller there, I need to define it via these waypoints. So I'm going to click on that waypoint. It's selected because you can see the position updated. If I choose the back area, you can see it updated here again. So I'm going to choose this waypoint, and the actual character size is set here. So now here I'm going to change this to 120. And now you can see if I move my kitty here, he's quite a bit larger. But I also need to set the back waypoint. So I'm going to click there and I'm going to change this to, let's say, 40. And look at that. The kitty changes size as we move across the room. And this is how we create depth to our backgrounds. Right. So now let's move over to cursors. This is step 5. Here we create all the cursors that will be used in our game. Things like look, use, talk, and so on. And the cursors are just that. It's the visual image that represents a cursor. The actual interaction, so what happens when what does it mean to look? That is all set in the interfaces option right here. Let's go to cursors and let's add a new cursor. Now I'm going to call this cursor walk to, and this will be my standard default cursor. Now when I've created a cursor, I also need to add images to it. And that I do by clicking on the plus icon right there. I'm going to click and I'm going to go look for an image under icons, this mouse.png. I'm going to add that and I'm going to click OK. Now my walk to command, or my walk to cursor, is represented by this arrow. Now I will do exactly the same for the inactive cursor. I have no difference between the there is no difference to me between the active and inactive, right? You can implement that, but for this exercise we won't distinguish between the two. Then you need to set the animation center as well. So I'm going to click and I'm going to just add my animation center, and I'm going to do the same for the inactive cursor. Now we can add as many cursors as we like. I'm going to add 2 more. I'm going to call the one look and I'm going to call the other one use. And I will add in my images, set the animation center, make sure I'm doing it for both the active and inactive. And I'll do the same for my use icon. Right, so our cursors are now done. Now, the next logical place then would be to go to our interfaces. And that we do by clicking on the interface button right there. So now we will create a new interface. And I'll do that by clicking on the plus icon right there. And I will call this Sam and Max. Now, the interface we're implementing in this video is the Sam and Max interface, which means that your commands cycle through. You have the look icon, you right click, and then you have the use icon. It cycles through. So to implement this, we need to create the different buttons that will be used by this interface. The first one I'm going to create is a walk to button, right? Because we have the cursor, but we also need the interface button to use that cursor. And you do this by clicking on the plus icon, and I just renamed it. Now, there are some properties that we need to set. And that's set in 2 areas, the button properties and the command properties. Now, the button properties, what we need to do, we need to choose the button type. Now, this is a command button. Walk to is a command. So this will be a command button. And when I do this, my command properties will open up. If you ever find that command properties are grayed out, that means you've got the wrong button type selected. So then on the command properties, I need to do 2 things. I need to give this interaction or this command a name. So this is going to be walk to. I'm then going to set the cursor that needs to use, and that's going to be the walk to cursor. And I'm going to save this by shortcut Control S. Now that I've created a walk to command, you would agree with me that the walk to command is your standard default command. If you're not looking at something or not using something, you want to be in the walk to state, the walk to interface, right? The walk to command. And you need to also tell the interface itself what is that standard command that it needs to use as the default. Because we created walk to now, we can set that as the standard. So I'm going to click on my interfaces and I'm going to click on properties. Now here in the standard command, I'm going to click on that drop down and I'm going to click on walk to. So now the walk to is my standard command. And this is something you only do once. We are going to create a look button and a use button, but we will never set that to look or use. This is something I did now once to define the walk to as the standard command. So let's do the same for look and use. I will do exactly the same as what I did before. I will add my name and the cursor that it corresponds to and save. I will do the same for my use. Now, we've created our cursors, we've created our interface that uses those cursors, but we also need to tell our main character that that is the interface it should use. Now you do that by clicking on the character, going to interfaces and ticking the interface that we created. So this will be used for our main character. Now you can see there's our interface, Sam and Max. Here under properties, interfaces, I have Sam and Max ticked. Right, so we're almost there. Now we need to set some game properties as well. Here, the first thing we want to do is set the option to escape the game or quit the game when a certain keyboard key is pressed. And we do that by clicking on the key actions. So here, I can add a new entry, and then in the execution type, I'm going to choose escape. So when a user presses escape on the keyboard, what do I need to want to happen? I want to have the game quit. So I will create a new entry, and under miscellaneous, I will choose quit game. And this means then that our game will quit when a user presses escape. The next item we need to set is on game properties again. We need to define the first scene. What is the first scene that will load? And I just did that. Click on the drop down and select the scene. Also choose the resolution. My background is 1920 by 180, so I will set it to that. Then choose the active character. Click on the drop down and choose main character as your active character. One more thing, because we are using the Sam and Max interface, we do need to do one step here. So I'm going to click on properties, and on the right mouse button here in the view action, I'm going to click there to bring up my actions and add a new action called set command. And this I will change to next command. So the interface will then, when I right click, cycle through all the available commands. Now, normally in Sam and Max, when you have a look icon and you look at something, it remains a look icon. You don't want to have a look icon, look at an object, and then have it revert to the standard walk icon, and then have to right click again to get to the look icon. So if you want to have it stay the current command, here in activate standard command, choose never. And the last item before we can run our game is, let's just add a simple interaction. So to do that, go to your scene, click on the hallway, ensure that you have objects selected, and then click on door. Now, actions are set under the Actions tab right here. What we will do is we will add a new action. And here we have execute command on object. This means left click. So what happens when we left click? But we need to define the command. So the cursor is look. What happens when we left click on the door? Right? That's what this means. Now we need to say what actually happens. So I'm going to create a new action part, and under character set display text. Now here I type the text that will be displayed. We are looking at a door, so I'm going to say it's a door. So what this means is I click with the eye icon on the door. It executes the look command because the look icon is being displayed on my cursor, and then it says, oh, I need to display text. It's a door. Now if my cursor is use, I add a new command here and I say a new action and I say use. Now what I will do here is I will choose display text again, and the character will say it's locked, because remember we have the use icon that we are using on the door, and the character says, hey, it's locked, I can't get in. And it really is as simple as that. So now I am going to just save my scene, and it's always a good idea to increment your scenes by using this option right here. So I will save open me first 0001, and then what I will do is I will save and run my game by clicking right there. And if all went well, I can move across the screen and you can see my character is moving. It's looking good. If I right click, I cycle through the different icons. If I use my eye icon on the door, the character says it's a door. If I right click and I try and use that door, the character says it's locked. That's just a quick explanation of what you need to get a scene up and running.